Juliana, you want to introduce our topic today?
Okay. Well, I'm going to thank everyone for joining us, and we've got just a great turnout today. And as mentioned earlier, this will be recorded, so for those who cannot join us live today, they can then watch our presentation at a later time at their convenience. So today we have. I'm going to basically turn the program over to you, Jeff, so that you can introduce Director Neal, who will tell us a little bit about the program and also introduce. We wanted to introduce all of our the speakers up front, so that once we start, that we can just move right in from speaker to speaker and not interrupt the flow of the program today. So we're extremely fortunate to have Director Neal today that will be doing that. So Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce Director Neal. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. And we do want to start out by mentioning to all of you who are tuning in that there are portions of the topic today that involve sensitive and potentially uncomfortable material for attendees. We have people who've been directly impacted by trafficking and exploitation. So we just want to encourage you, if you need to step away and take a break, disconnect from the program, please take care of yourselves, and we'll post contact information at the end of the program. And if there's anyone out there tuning in that needs connection to helpful resources yourself, we would be honored to help you get connected to that. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce the Executive Director for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, Jane Neal. After serving in the Georgia House of Representatives from 2004 to 2013, Director Neal was appointed by Governor Deal to serve as the Executive Director for the Governor's Office of Transition, Support, and Reentry. And then he was appointed to this current role in 2016. We're super grateful for your leadership, Director Neal. Thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that very much, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with everyone today. What an incredible turnout! It's great to see so many people that are interested in this legislative update. As a former member of the legislature, I always find the legislative updates to be very interesting and informative, and we're privileged to have some of our legislative champions with us today. The work that you all do as part of the task force is critical work. There's no question about that. But it requires the buy-in and the leadership of the legislature for us to be able to continue moving the work forward. And we've got some real champions in the Georgia General Assembly. Obviously, the First Lady is leading the way when it comes to the fight against human trafficking, and we've got some champions in the legislature that have joined that fight as well, and have the privilege to introduce a few of those for you today. And again, I will be introducing all of them before we begin, and not necessarily in the order that they're going to be presenting today. So let me just go ahead and make our introductions. Senator Jason Anavitardi is with us today. He represents Paulding and Polk counties in Senate District 31. He's a former member of the Paulding County School Board and former councilman for the city of Doraville, which is where he was raised. For nearly 20 years, Jason has worked as a businessman in the private sector and healthcare industry, developing solutions to help lift up families out of poverty by finding employment, skills gap training, and developing life skills. He served as the chairman of the board of trustees at Chattahoochee Technical College, which is the largest technical college in Georgia. In 2018, he was selected to join the American Enterprise Institute Leadership Network. In 2016, he was appointed by Judge Dean Bucci to serve on the executive committee of the Paulding Judicial Circuit Drug Court Program. Jason's a past board member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Paulding Public Safety Appreciation Incorporated, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and Child Advocacy Centers of Georgia. He received a BA from Georgia State University and an MS in Regional Economic Development and IT Telecommunications Policy from Georgia Tech. He and his family attend Burnt Hickory Baptist Church. Jason and his wife Jennifer have daughters Taylor, Madison, and Kennedy, and reside in Dallas, Georgia. Representative Houston Gaines was elected to the State House in 2018. Representative Gaines is in his third term in the General Assembly, representing portions of Barrow, Clark, Jackson, and Oconee counties. Professionally, Representative Gaines spent his career helping grow small businesses in the Athens area. He works at Carter Engineering, where he focused on expanding the successful small business. He previously worked at Cannon Financial Institute, another small business in the region, where he served clients across the country in the financial industry. As a third-generation Athenian and grandson of the late Judge Joseph Gaines, Representative Gaines has long been engaged in the community. He's a member of the Athens Rotary Club and previously served on the Envision Athens Steering Committee, Junior League of Athens Community Advisory Board, Lead Athens Alumni Association Board of Directors, and multiple K-12 and University of Georgia boards. He currently serves on the School of Public and International Affairs Alumni Board in the Northeast Georgia Boy Scouts Council Executive Board. He's a 2015 Lead Athens graduate and graduate of the Zell Millers Foundation Leadership Institute. A summa cum laude graduate of the University of Georgia, Representative Gaines served as student body president while at UGA and was named to its 2020 40 under 40 class. Representative Alan Powell was born in Hartwell, Georgia. Chairman Powell graduated from Hart County High School. He later attended Georgia Southwestern College, where he earned a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science. He's been a lifelong resident of Hartwell and resides on the shores of Lake Hartwell. He is the owner of Red Clay Properties and was elected to the Georgia House of Representatives in 1990. He is a senior member in the Georgia House of Representatives. Prior to his election to the Georgia General Assembly, he served as chairman of the Hart County Board of Commissioners. In the Georgia House of Representatives, he served as the chairman of the Motor Vehicles Committee, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, and currently serves as the chairman of the Regulated Industries Committee. He's a standing member of Appropriations, Governmental Affairs, Motor Vehicles, Public Safety and Homeland Security, Rules, and Small Business Development Committees. He was appointed to serve on the Board of Homeland Security in 2018 by Governor Deal. He's a state representative for House District 32, which covers Franklin and Hart County and a portion of Madison County. Just as a side note, yesterday I was at Jekyll Island in a hotel elevator headed to the Council of Superior Court Judges conference, and there was individuals in the elevator with me. We struck up a conversation, and they're from Hartwell, and I asked if they knew Representative Powell, and they said everybody in Hartwell knows and loves Representative Powell. We're thrilled to have him on with us today. Shannon Rapier has been the Safe Home Manager for Out of Darkness in Atlanta for 6.5 years. Out of Darkness is the anti-trafficking department with frontline response. Shannon is a certified addiction drug counselor, a peer support specialist, and a proud survivor leader. She is passionate about the opportunity to use her testimony and experience to empower other survivors to find freedom. Shannon is a wife and mother of 2 amazing children. Susan Cobb, RN, Master's in Science of Nursing, and founder of Justice for Jennifer Cobb, a website to promote the awareness and education of sexual grooming. Susan Cobb is the mother of victim of social media grooming, and her family's experience informed the creation of Protecting Georgia's Children on Social Media Act of 2024. We have an amazing slate of speakers today. We're proud to be able to present them for you and look forward to hearing their update during this session. Thank you all so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Director Neal. We appreciate that. We do have an incredible lineup, and we're going to kick it off today with Representative Gaines and House Bill 1201. So I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. And it's great to see so many people, a couple hundred people on here. That's awesome. So glad to see so many folks tuned in, and certainly want to thank Senator Anna Vitarte and Chairman Powell, Chairman Anabatartes, he's a caucus chairman in the Senate, and Chairman Powell in the House both do a great job, and really two incredible leaders in the state legislature that I'm honored to serve alongside. And so I want to thank them both for their strong leadership. I know y'all asked me to speak on House Bill 1201, which was a measure that we passed this year. I want to kind of back up a little bit. When I first got elected in 2018, I know, Director Neal, when you were mentioning I got elected in 2018, in my first term, that's kind of where I first got interested and really motivated to try to be involved in this arena and try to make a difference. I know y'all are all familiar with the First Lady of Georgia's work to try to make Georgia, number one in stopping human trafficking. And so that's she's done an amazing job putting Georgia on the map and really making Georgia a model for the rest of the country. And so I've enjoyed working alongside her. In my first term, I passed a piece of legislation related to CDL licenses to ensure that we permanently revoke bad actors in that space. So that was my first kind of bill in this arena, and really got to work with Director Neal and the whole team at that time, and just amazing what CJCC does every single day for survivors and for victims across the state. And really, I think all of our motto in this in the legislative side is punish perpetrators and support survivors. And that's what we need to focus on in everything we do legislatively in this arena. And so, I've been on the punish perpetrator side to try to, ensure we are going after those horrible individuals that perpetrate these crimes. And have also, this session and previous sessions worked on legislation to help victims and survivors of human trafficking. As many of you all know, a lot of times survivors end up with a criminal record as a result of their being trafficked. And so what the legislature did in years past was to create a way for victims who have a criminal record as a result of being trafficked to have their sentences vacated. And so that has been really, I think, really good legislation that we passed in years past. The bill that we passed this year, House Bill 1201, was really just strengthening that bill that passed a couple years ago, because there were a few folks that were left out. And you had individuals who had either gone through what was called a first offender program or conditional discharge that technically weren't convicted, but as part of their first offender, they were did have some sort of sentencing or otherwise to complete. They weren't eligible to have their sentences vacated. And so it was frankly an oversight in the law, and sometimes that happens when the General Assembly passes legislation. There's things that you find out a year or two later that need to be fixed. And so we heard from CJCC and certainly advocates who came to the table and said we need to fix this loophole and frankly a problem in the law. And so that's what we did. We passed House Bill 1201 this year. The governor's office was very involved, CJCC, advocates, survivors. And so I'm really proud of that bill and think it's a good measure. It's been signed obviously by the governor now. It's now the law. One other thing I'll mention that was added by the Department of Human Services, because I think it's just another good part of the bill that wasn't originally a part of the measure, but it defines commercial sexual exploitation recovery centers. And that's like Grace's place that many of you are familiar with that the First Lady opened. And really the goal there is to try to make licensing more streamlined for our hope is additional centers like that to open across the state. And so that's really what House Bill 1201 did. I really, I'm excited to hear from Shannon. I know she's someone that has just done incredible work across our state. So I want to thank you, Shannon, and I look forward to hearing your comments. And I'll be brief. I'd happy to answer questions if we're able to. I don't know how this works exactly. Technology is you never know. But I just want to thank you for having me and thank everybody on this call for the work you do every single day.
Thanks so much, Representative Gaines. We do have a few more minutes with you, so I would like to ask a follow-up. And And just thank you on behalf of all of us working on this issue in the state for your leadership. And it's thinking back 13 years ago where the state of the law was regarding trafficking and exploitation and the level of depth that we're getting to now. And we probably say this every year, but this was my favorite year to see the legislation that came out of Georgia. And I know as Georgians, we're all really proud of it. Can something I think a lot of us don't understand as much is how bills actually work their way through to the governor's desk. And so could you just share a little bit regarding 1201 with when you're writing the bill or someone's writing it and bringing it to you, what does that initial process look like? And then how do you identify who you need to bring in terms of different groups or agencies, things like that?
Oh, absolutely. And every bill is kind of different. There's, we have what's called legislative counsel, which is lawyers that work for the General Assembly, and they draft legislation. And so any bill that is introduced has to be ultimately drafted by legislative counsel. In the case of House Bill 1201, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council had worked with the governor's office and kind of had a draft of the legislation of what they thought it may look like. And so then we worked with legislative counsel to fine tune that draft, and the lawyers for the General Assembly put it in, correct formatting, for lack of better words, so that it actually can be introduced as a bill. And so we introduced that, I want to say late January. Our sessions are January, February, March. And that's when we're kind of at the Capitol every day. So we introduced that bill. We worked to get co-sponsors on it. That's something that we like to do in both the House and Senate. And there's several representatives. Obviously, about Senator Anna Batarte and Chairman Powell. There's a lot of representatives and senators who want to be helpful and try to support survivors and go after perpetrators. So, we identified several co-sponsors, got those individuals to sign on to the bill. Then you introduce it, which is where you basically just hand it to the clerk of the House. They get it on the public website and all those sort of things. That's when you start really hearing from people, because at that point it's a public document where folks are, who have interest in the issue can be heard. And so then you have a committee hearing. After talking to the chairman of the committee, we had a couple committee hearings on this bill, and it was all just really great testimony from across the state. And moved out of committee. Then it goes to the House Rules Committee, then the House floor. Then you got to do it all over again in the Senate. And so it's quite a process it ultimately takes. And it's interesting. So we passed it in the House kind of as it was introduced. The Department of Human Services language that I mentioned was added in the Senate. So the Senate can make changes to the bill. And typically the author of the bill is supportive of those. That doesn't always happen. But in this case, certainly the Department of Human Services came to me, and then I went to the Senate folks who were working on this, and we all agreed to make the changes as requested from the Department of Human Services, and got a really good bill over the finish line. And then it goes to the Senate. If they make changes, it has to come back to the House. So it did come back to the House on day 40, which is the last day of session, and which is about how it always works. And we, as many of you on this call know, on the last day or two of session, we probably take over 100, 150 votes in 2 days. And we go from 10 a.m. to midnight both those days. And so this was one of those bills where we were voting on it late in the evening, but got over the finish line. Then the governor has 40 days to sign it. He signed it at the Capitol a couple weeks after session. Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions, but this is Juliana McCall again, and I want to thank you so much. I'm there at the Capitol and working, and I just appreciate having the opportunity to work with you and the other legislators that have joined us today. And thank you for all the hard work. And as you just explained to us, it takes it's quite a task to get it to work with those to get it introduced, and then to ultimately, especially when changes are made, and then to get it finally with that approval, and then to the governor for signing. But thank you again. Thank you for joining us, taking time out of your day to join us to this was so important for those. You see, we have so many people on the call, and as mentioned earlier, it's going to be taped, so there'll even be others watching this later. So, and if any questions do come from anyone later, if you'll share those questions with Elena at CJCC, and then we can forward those on to the legislators, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to provide you with any answers to questions you might have today. And then, as you mentioned, Representative Houston, and also that Director Jay introduced Shannon Rapier earlier in this meeting today. And Shannon, we just so appreciate you taking time. And as you heard, it's advocates like you who work with our legislators in helping to identify the issues and problems that we need to address and changes we need to make in the statute. And you're there helping to identify and then helping to advocate to make sure that we get this legislation drafted and get it approved by the legislature and assigned by the governor. So we would like to now turn it over to you and let you kind of share, your journey and then also how this particular legislation and any other legislation maybe that has been passed has impacted you. Okay, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So how I originally got involved is just in this fight. My backstory is I get emotional, so just everybody bear with me. So my backstory is at 13 years old, I grew up with a family that was wrapped around drugs, in and out of prison, in and out of jail, and I really didn't have family that truly made sure that all of my needs were met. And my grandmother did the best that she could. And I then quickly found myself addicted to drugs myself. And at 13, my mom introduced me to an older guy. And at the time, I did not realize what was taking place. Now I can look back and see what took place. But at 13, she introduced me to an older guy who sold drugs. And there was this, I started staying with him, and my mom got free drugs. And like I said, I did drugs myself. So then it just became this repetitive cycle. And the relationship became abusive, very controlling. I had to stay beside him consistently. And it was that familial trafficking that we hear about. And it was that space of, I was not trafficked out to other people. Like, I was just solely his. And our relationship was abusive, all about drugs. I would carry drugs for him. I would be the one that when he would go pick them up, they were in my possession. And so it was very traumatic, but in the moment I was like, this is what life is, right? Like, so this is how my life turned out. And I didn't really understand any other life outside of that. And this man, I was with him from the time I was 13 until he was 21, or until I was 21, I'm sorry. And within that time frame, by the time I was 21, he was killed in a car accident. And my entire life was turned upside down because he is all I ever knew. Dropped out of school, didn't have friends. We had a son together, but that was it. That's all I ever knew. Him and drugs, right? And so at 21, I found myself in a strip club, and I met these women who said, I can help you make more money than what you're making here in the strip club. And I said, okay. And so then from there, I was in a hotel day in and day out, and I had two madams. And I was not eligible to take care of my son because I was on drugs. And in that time frame, they would feed me drugs but take my money. So I was not able to fully care for my son. Again, my grandmother stepped in just like she did with me as a child. And then I started getting in trouble. I started in and out of jail because I was shoplifting. I got caught with drugs on me. And so then I became a problem for them. And so they just kind of dropped me like a bad habit. And so I still then needed to learn how to survive. And so I started doing exploitation on my own. And I ended up overdosing, and that is when I realized that I really thought I was going to die. And the judge in Bartow County was completely done with me. I'd been in and out of jail so many times. I was going to face 5 years in prison. Um, so many different charges, some charges that didn't stick, some charges that did. All of the possession charges absolutely stuck. And so I remember sitting in jail, and that is when Out of Darkness actually came to the jail to visit and explain what the program was. And I applied to go to Out of Darkness. And that is where my journey began in November of 2014. I sat in jail for 4.5 months. And then November of 2014, end of November, I started my journey with Out of Darkness. And from there, the first time I entered into the safe home, I realized that I really wanted to do something to help others. And I had no idea, like looking back, I had no idea I'd be sitting where I'm at today. But I wanted to help other women who were in the same situation that I was in, because I didn't know there was any help. I didn't know that there was organizations that help women coming out of sex trafficking or commercial sex exploitation. Like, I had no idea. And so after I completed a long-term program, I started going back to school. I've become a certified addiction drug counselor. I have a peer support specialist. I started working with Out of Darkness 6.5 years ago, and I've just really found a passion of helping survivors and using my testimony to do it, and really being in a space of just saying that a survivor is worthy and she deserves a second, third, and fourth, and how many ever chances it takes for her. Because it did not just take one chance for me. It took multiple chances for me. And so, yeah, so that's how I really got involved. Just within this field, and now I will do anything that I can to help a survivor overcome. I've actually shared the bill with a couple of the women that I mentor now, and they're trying to work through their vacatur. And so it's important. It's important for me to be able to share the journey that I have been on. um, and so, this bill has absolutely impacted my life. I started the process back in October to go after vacatur. Jeff actually was talking to me about it, and he was like, "You should do this," and I was like, "Oh." And I really never thought that I could, right? Like, I heard about it, I heard about the bill, I heard about the work that Jeff's been doing, CJCC, and just really heard everything that was taking place, but I never thought that I was good enough to do it. Like, I never thought that I was worthy and that I was deserving of this. And so it just took that one person to speak into my life and say, "You should do this. You should go after the vacatur." And for me, that was Jeff. Um, and so I started sending emails, and I really started the process um, in October. And um, through the entire process, it has been a waves of emotion. I'm just going to be very honest. It was not easy. This process and working with attorneys, I worked with attorneys from Jones Day, I believe that is their law firm, and I was connected to them through Street Grace, um, and I the amount of times that I had to sit with these attorneys, they did everything virtual. They were great, by the way, great attorneys. Um, they really cared for how I shared what I was sharing. But the amount of times that I had to sit with them and dissect my past, my history. I had to talk about each charge, that each arrest. I had to really go through And I've shared my testimony many times, but this one just hit really different for me. And I was in a space of a lot of vulnerability, sitting in the space with attorneys, and really nervous and really scared in the process. I had so much support around me, which I'm very grateful for. So many people encouraging me, but there was just that inside of me that kept saying, "Am I worthy? Do I deserve this?" Because that's that lie that I held on to my entire life of I don't deserve anything outside of what I got. And going through this, um, sorry guys, going through this process and reading more about the Georgia's vacatur law and reading more about all the hours that was spent putting this law into place, and just even hearing you guys already share about just the countless hours until after midnight sitting in rooms really passing this law. Like even right now I'm like, wow, like you guys did all of that for myself and for so many other survivors. Um, and I think that it is something that I will say has absolutely changed my life. Um, I started going back to school this year, and um, in that, I was actually sitting on my couch, um, getting ready to take one of my finals. I took a break from school. I'd been studying all day, and I was getting ready to take one of my finals, and um, I got the email that came through, and it said, "Shannon, we just want to say congratulations. We just want to say congratulations. You are no longer a convicted felon. You no longer have to check the box." And I had to report my criminal history to jobs, to housing. My husband and I have been trying to, like, I cannot, I mean, now I can, but I could not even rent from an apartment complex because they do not allow convicted felons. Um, I, um, when I applied for school, I had to let them know that I was a convicted felon, and they actually wanted to see my my record, and that brings so much shame. Like I'm trying to better my life and I'm trying to go back to school and I want to further my education to help other survivors. But this school needed to see my criminal history because they needed to know who was on campus. And I remember texting a few friends and I was like, guys, I'm really nervous because just had to send my history to the school. And what if they don't accept me? What if they don't accept me because of my charges? And um, in that moment, all the shame and all the fear and all the guilt for the life choices and everything that has held me down for so long just came flooding back. And that's 9 years, 9 years of being out of the life, 9 years of walking in freedom, 9 years of recovery, 9 years, and all of that stuff just comes flooding back. And I I think in the moment of reading the email that said that I am no longer a convicted felon, I have shared with a few people um, that my biggest thing is like I'm so excited to check the box. So excited to check the box that says I am not a convicted felon. I haven't had to do that yet, but I'm just waiting to fill out an application that says that I can check it, and I'm going to take a picture. And I'm going to be so proud of that picture because I have held on to the stigma of being a convicted felon for years. And I have held on to, oh, I can't apply for this job. I can't live in this place. I have to share with people that I have this history. I have, and even though that's not who I am, it still just follows me. It's like a backpack that you wear consistently, right? And so when I have been able and it's really, I think it's only been 2 months, not even 2 months. I remember Sherry, I like screenshot the email and I started sending it out. And I sent it to Jeff and I sent it to so many other people. And I was like, look at this, guys. Like, look at this. And I'm still working through the process, obviously. But to know that you guys have made a way for somebody like me, um, to break free, right? Like break free from the stigma of a convicted felon, to say that my past is no longer going to define my future. That has absolutely been the most beautiful thing for me. And I know that I fully believe that I went through this process to not only clear my record, but so I can support other survivors and I can say, hey, I know somebody I can connect you with. I know somebody who can help you get through this process. And so I'm so excited to support, to be able, just send a letter for me so that I can send it to my attorneys and say, to verify that I am a survivor. And I'm excited to write those letters. I'm excited to say I went through this, but now I'm an overcomer. And this, because of all of your hard work and because you have all believed in survivors getting a second chance or third or fourth, I can still stand up and say, I don't have to carry this baggage, but also I can help other survivors break free. And so, uh, Jeff, I don't know if you have any questions. I know I have talked a whole lot, yeah, thank you.
Shannon, I feel like there's, with all the muted microphones, there's just a collective applause that has been happening as you're talking. I'm seeing all the comments come through of people cheering you on. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us in saying thank you for the gift of your story, your advocacy, the power that you're bringing into our space. The courage, not everyone's called to share their story, but that's something that you've really utilized as a weapon against human trafficking. And we're honored to sit here and hear from you. And again, you said it so eloquently, but for all of those who had those late nights, Juliana and the representatives and senators and CJCC team and task force and coalition members, that we don't always get to hear, like we know the concepts of what's going to happen, but you are a living example of why this is important and how it can change lives, with the things that we're applying ourselves to. And so once again, what a tremendous honor. Thank you so much, Shannon. We're excited to see you continue to lead the charge in our state and beyond in the years to come. So thank you again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all.
Awesome. Well, y'all, seriously, every single speaker we could do an entire hour with. But just what an amazing panel. I'm excited to introduce our next person who will be sharing with us, Senator Anna Vitarte. And I'm really excited about the legislation that he helped lead through for us, Senate Bill 351. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you.
Jeff, thanks for having me. Shannon, that was awesome. Um, that was awesome. I'm speechless. Anyway, I don't even want to go next, Jeff. So thank you, Juliana, Director Neal, Vice Chairman Gaines, Alan, everybody that's here for having me today. Talk about, I know y'all are working on important stuff all the time, and I'm sure that's always said and it's cliche, but literally, y'all are on the front lines of life and death and um, protecting individuals in so many different ways. Which leads me to talk about Senate Bill 351, a bill that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and myself decided to take up. Very complex bill, some ways maybe even controversial, depending on where you stand on the topic. Um, but I don't think have to really explain. I'm just, as the dad of, three girls, and I've served on my school board. My wife, she's a teacher at our local high school. Social media is literally destroying, kids' lives in the classroom. It's impacting teachers. Um, we can have a whole conversation, good, bad, or ugly, as it relates to social media and the national security threats that I know are being debated in Congress. Surprisingly, with bipartisan support, in terms of, what we're seeing, different apps and things and the impact it's having on kids. And I will tell you too, we've seen in my own community, and I can't publicly talk about it, um, but knowing that, social media and cell phones has also played a role in schools in terms of young children being, victims of human trafficking, and work that I know our local prosecutors, law enforcement, even the U.S. Attorney's Office has been working on, to where, pretty close to even my kids, we've seen individuals in other states cross state lines through different apps to reach kids and try and traffic them to other states. And I want to thank our federal partners and local partners for all the work that they're doing on that front. Um, so 351 basically kind of had 3 or 4 or 5 tenets to it. In the beginning, it started basically as a bill to address social media with our kids. Later in session, kind of as Representative Gaines talked about in terms of the process, there were bills being stalled, and there was a pornography bill and some other pieces that were added to our bill. But the core piece of 351 really addressed and talked about addressing age verification. Those under the age of 16 from opening a social media account without express consent, from a minor parent, guardian. I know we had some debate on that in committee, even a little bit on the floor of the House and Senate. But I'll tell you from my perspective, my view, and even I guess my upbringing, um, you know, even today, I mean, you're really, I mean, I know our kids are acting like they're older. Mine act like they're older when they're 10 years old or 12 years old and 14 years old. Um, but, an adult is an adult, when you get to 17, 17 and a half, 18. And so we believe, and I won't speak for the Lieutenant Governor, but I know he feels the same as I do. I think whatever we can do to, wrap our arms around, express consent from parents, guardians, grandparents, in terms of receiving activation from social media companies, I think is important. I do not believe it's a free speech infringement whatsoever. Knock on wood, this bill has not been challenged yet. I'm sure somebody will get the idea they want to go challenge it in court, and as I've told people, we'll see them in court. So, but I think it's a reasonable effort. We worked with and heard from the social media companies, Meta, Google, all of them, on that topic. And as Representative Gaines says, we go through drafting legislation. I know there are probably, somewhere between, I'll just say over probably 20 drafts, 25 drafts of this bill in some shape or form in terms of getting feedback from advocates, um, victims, families, children, teachers, principals, law enforcement, district attorneys, as we went into crafting this piece of legislation. So this was very complex. It was very difficult. The other piece is, requiring school districts to have social media policies in place. I know, like my own in Paulding County, Georgia, we have those policies. I know our Julie Ragsdale, who runs our chief technology officer in our school district, she does a phenomenal job. She's kind of always ahead of the game, ahead of the curve when it comes to this kind of stuff. But we do have a reasonable number of school districts in the state that may not have these policies, or maybe the policies are current and up to date. And not just protecting our kids, but as we talk about cyber security and we talk about cyber attacks and all these other things, a lot of the folks that are trying to break into our systems are going through these apps, or getting into phones, laptops, all kinds of devices. And so we just want to make sure we're, from a security perspective, um, we're set. I work on a lot of cybersecurity policy and legislation with the Georgia Technology Authority and private sector leaders. And we always talk about our K-12 environment. We talk about schools being vulnerable. as one of the most vulnerable places that bad actors, even overseas, are trying to get into our system. So really sensitive to me. And the purpose of the policies as it relates to the school districts, which impact social, emotional, and physical effects. I think most of you all know that. Social media manipulating influences and behaviors. You know, that classroom dynamic. I know my teacher will tell me the amount of teaching time lost or classroom time lost helping a child or a student, because they're having to have conversations about shutting phones off or putting phones away, or somebody on the phone texting with their neighbor in the desk next to them. Back in the day, I guess for all of us, it was, for me, it was writing answers on the bottom of my shoe and maybe sharing it with my friend if we wanted to be really creative, when it comes to cheating on tests and everything else. But let's just take that dynamic times 30 of what it is today. And unfortunately, that's the environment that, as advocates and leaders, we're all operating in. And do treat it as a level of protection when we talk to our school leaders. And then I think, as I mentioned before, as it relates to human trafficking, how to report suspicious behavior encountered on the internet and social media, because we know that all of our kids, to a certain level, we always say, here's something, say something. But because of bullying, because of the threats on a personal level from friend to a friend, or even on sports teams and everything in this day and age, people are afraid to report what they hear, especially if I'm 14, 15, 16, or even 10, 11, 12. There's a social consequence. A lot of young kids will feel, or there'll be, whether it's in a virtual sense, as we're talking about, or even some cases we'll see it escalate to a physical situation. And so, our goal over the next year, in 2 years, is to really work with our school leaders to, create a conducive environment to where kids feel safe, to talk, to share, all of these different things, in order to keep them safe. And I know this bill is only step one of that. And there are some things I feel like we need to rein in and we need to dial back. I don't want to sound too archaic, but I think we have to, if we want to, protect our kids from human trafficking, but also to, I think, really get to a place to where the classroom environment and the school environment is back to being a safe place, like we all hopefully believe. Um, the bill also requires school boards to prohibit and prevent students from accessing social media platforms. So the networks that schools operate in all the school buildings in Georgia, will get to a place, or they should be in a place, to where you can't get on Facebook and Twitter and all these things while you're in the building, on school devices. I know there's a debate as to whether is it a First Amendment infringement as it relates to personal devices, and I think we're sensitive to that. But if it's a wireless, or if it's the internet, or if it's anything, and we can go down rabbit holes of school security, I think shutting all those, the access points off, I think is key as it relates to anything regarding school networks. Um, One cool thing we did was we updated the cyberbullying and bullying statute, probably for the first
Nice.
time in 11 or 12 years in Georgia. Um, we found that those statutes had not been updated, and if I had showed you the old language, it would look very archaic. It would look very just. I mean, you would be like, well, that doesn't apply in 2024 in the sense of technology, or even situations where school boards or principals or superintendents and how they've had to address tribunals and other things. So we updated that part of the provision too, which we were proud of. And then all the enforcement and liability, twofold. It's enforced by the Attorney General, and we were very sensitive to make sure that teachers, staff in schools, parapros, our frontline advocates are in the schools, our counselors. There's not a level of liability that's placed on them for any of this, and we try to be sensitive to that, because we know teachers, they have one of the hardest jobs in the world. And so, because they act in a certain way, and I know we find in culture and policy and law or whatever we want to describe it as, we have a lot of teachers, that get nitpicked or worried about being in trouble over some of the smallest stuff, and we can have a separate debate on that. But it's also keeping a lot of teachers from wanting to be in the profession, wanting to make those investments in the classroom, and even leaving the profession. And so, thus, we see the erosion of our education system across Georgia, and it's a national, phenomenon. But being sensitive to what we see here, I think there's a lot of work we have to do on that front. And I do think some of those tenets of that, while me and the minority party, we may have our own ways of how we get there, I do think, from a bipartisan, from across the board perspective, there are a lot of those tenets that we all agree on in terms of how we get there. And I would say for this bill, almost every aspect of this bill, I think most of the debate focus on, of what is free speech and what is not. Um, so that's kind of the highlights of the bill. I will say that in the coming weeks, just kind of as a teaser, we social that we do think impacts um, students learning. Maybe to an extent it does impact human trafficking, um, but we think we have more work to do here. I know Congress, as broken as it is, they're trying to take up these topics. I know the lieutenant governor and myself and other leaders have had conversations with members of Congress. Congress can't even pass a ham sandwich, so we feel like it's upon ourselves to really work with you all. Um, to address these issues at the state level. And if things, get challenged in the judicial system, well, that's why we have, the third branch of government to have those debates there too. But, if anybody has ideas, on these topics, or you think maybe, even if they go too far, or maybe they don't go far enough, we're always open to hearing those ideas. I mean, that's one thing that, my office, and me as a leader on a variety of pieces of legislation. Even if I disagree with you, I'm still going to talk to you. I'm still going to listen to you. I have found in those conversations that even small things or even big things can be found in terms of commonality to find ways to work together. And I think with everything that we're seeing and the impact that we're seeing on this dynamic with our kids ratcheting up, unfortunately, especially the global scale that we're seeing it, especially as we're seeing, concerns with smugglers in South America, even coming as far away as China. From the conversations I've had with members of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee and Foreign Affairs Committee, we have a lot of work to do. So, and all of you are on the front lines of that. So I just want to say thank you for the hard work that you're doing, and trying to solve some of these problems, or, hopefully one day make somebody's life a little bit better in the work you're doing. So Jeff, I'll answer any questions, or if there's any other topics on this you want to talk about, or anything else you want to talk about.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you for your courage, because I've heard a lot of the controversy around these bills, and some similar ones have processed through other states, and they're already being challenged in those state Supreme Courts. And I want to just underscore a couple things that you said. One of them, the CDC came out with a study last year that said that teen girls are experiencing record high levels of violence, sadness, and suicide risk. And a lot of that ties into social media, and then also the narratives of pornography, which, for folks who don't know what internet pornography looks like nowadays, it's predominantly violence perpetrated by men toward women and transgenders. And also there's narratives of racism, like really strong racism, in modern day pornography as well. And those are giving our children a sexual education that's broken and violent and degrading. And so as adults, to draw a line in the sand and say, we want to protect our children from what's happening online. And these are the ways we can do it as a state. As a parent of 3 children who are 7, 5, and 2, I'm extremely grateful that their future likely just got much safer. And, when we talk and think about pornography and the way that it grooms boys to become sexual perpetrators and girls to be perpetrated against and normalizes those messages, this is just phenomenal. And I know not everybody agrees with us, but I just want to tell you personally, as a father and a citizen of Georgia, how profoundly grateful I am, and that I do believe these are the systemic changes that will start to shift trafficking and exploitation over the long haul. So I'm going to reach out to you. I want to sit with you for 2 hours, but I know we've got 2 more speakers still in the lineup. So I'm going to hand it over to Juliana to make those introductions. And thanks once again.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you, Senator Anavartardi. It's always a pleasure working with you, and we appreciate so much the work that you did, and especially coming on today and sharing with us about the Senate Bill 351. And we look forward to continuing to work with you in future legislation. So again, thank you. I appreciate it and consider he's also a dear friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's now my honor to also introduce another good friend at the state legislature, and that's Representative Alan Powell. And Representative Powell is going to talk to us today about House Bill 993. And we also have with us Susan Cobb, who was and you'll learn more about her story and how she approached Representative Powell and encouraged him and worked with him to advocate for the passage of House Bill 993, we called the Grooming Bill. So I'll turn it over to you, my dear friend, Representative Alan Powell. Elena, is Representative Powell able? He was.
Representative Powell, can you hear us? Can you unmute? There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can.
Juliana, can you hear me?
I certainly can. The floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon to you and your friends there.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And
I'm sorry I had to step out. I'm at another meeting and I've been waiting for a few minutes. So I just stepped outside so I could speak to y'all. I want to thank y'all for the opportunity to address this issue. I did catch Senator Anavartardi's comments. And, I look back as a student of history and I see that things hadn't changed. We've always had exploitation. We've always had trafficking. And once upon a time, it wasn't called trafficking, if you look at history's sake. But today is something that we don't tolerate in our society. I've got about 5 minutes to speak, but I did want to thank y'all. Want to thank everybody for their hard work and for Representative Gaines for his work this past session on the bill that he did. The bill that I did is a process. It took 2 years of perfection. This wasn't something, even though I had, in my past history in the legislature, I've chaired the Public Safety Committee, so I'm somewhat familiar with a lot of the ins and outs of this stuff. But we had a situation that happened up in my home county. And I tell people, don't think that reaching out to your local representative or senator doesn't do any good. But we had a situation that transpired a few years ago, and I had listened to all of the stuff and just really couldn't get a grip on everything happening because the idea of an adult grooming a young child as young as 10, 11, 12 years old to get them to a certain point in age so that they can use them as a sexual tool is just something that's just mind blowing to me. We had a situation in our county that a young lady, a lovely young lady from a good family, and supposedly the coach at the YMCA had basically groomed her, and this was paying compliments, giving little gifts, sending texts, those type of things. And when this girl reached a certain age, and I think it was 16, then he culminated that by sexual activity. My understanding through all of this was that this only lasted a short time, and he picked up another young girl that he had been grooming. And at this point, the girl that we're talking about just went into major depressions, and what wound up happening at that point, she eventually committed suicide after a series of court appearances with this guy. Now, I have said, since this guy has not been to trial, I'm not trying to lay the blame or to lay credit or blame what he had done, because the court and the jury would do that. But I saw at that point something that needed to be done in this new day of technology, of the Facebook and texting and that kind of thing. And that was what we did. 2 years ago, I put in a bill, but I decided it just wasn't right. I was afraid that it would be overturned by the courts. And at that time, I reached out to the prosecuting attorney's counsel, our good friend Pete Moritakis, and he put me in touch with some skilled district attorneys that had handled these type of cases in the past. And we had drafted a bill that would give prosecutors another arrow in their quiver to go after these guys who do certain things. And those certain things would be paying attention, doing things on the internet to entice a minor for those sexual purposes. Now, you're going to have a speaker, the mother of that young lady, I think she is scheduled to come in after me. And I will tell you that hopefully this isn't the stopping point. We've got to do things that are constitutional so they don't get overturned by the courts, and then give them the tools that law enforcement needs to go after these terrible, terrible individuals. Juliana?
Yeah, Representative Powell, thank you. Thank you so much for stepping out of your meeting and joining us and sharing the backstory and motivation for you to tackle the issue of grooming. And we'll let you get back to your thing, but just thanks again for your advocacy and for sharing with us today.
Listen, thank you so much, Representative, and thank you, Juliana, and to all the folks that's on the recording. And I understand you're going to hear the story firsthand from the mother of that child.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
And so with that, we are gonna welcome Susan Cobb onto the call. And I know this is a very painful story. It's something I've grieved as a parent, as I've heard it too. And we just want to thank you so much for the way you've taken the legacy and championed a better world for future children. And you are our closing speaker, so you're going to take us home, and I'm going to turn it over to you for these last 15 minutes. Once again, just with a huge thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. At first, I just want to give God the glory. We would not be here today if it were not for him, I'm convinced. He's allowed our family to be strong and to fight. I also want to thank our daughter, Jennifer, for having the ability to come forth and be brave and be strong and go up against a community who had never heard of the term grooming or sexual grooming. But Jennifer, she loved kids, and she knew at the moment that she could recognize that other children were being targeted. She knew that she had to come forth and protect those children. So I want to give thanks to my daughter as well, because this bill is possible because of her strength, her courage, and because of God's strength and ability to push us through such a difficult time. It's been a very dark time in our life, but we push forward in hopes to save one more child. Our goal when we speak, when we have events, if we can just save one child at that event, that's our goal. So Jennifer, in short, without going into all of the details, um, started gymnastics when she was 11. We did not know that Jennifer was sexually groomed until she was 14, and that is when her brother walked in and witnessed the act. That's when we found out, and we approached the law officers to investigate. Um, because Jennifer was 14, she was not willing to come forth, and that's something that people do not understand. Victims are afraid to come forth, and when they're a child, it's even harder for them to come forth. Their brains are not developed until they are 25 years old. She was 14, and even at 25, there's going to be a delay in their brain development if they have been sexually abused. 14 did not come forth. She didn't admit that it happened, therefore, they did not investigate. That sexual grooming continued until she was 20. We're convinced that she was being groomed for marriage because she left home at 18, and within months, he had proposed to her, and the goal was to marry her. But we prayed that her eyes would be opened and that she would, God would open her eyes. And I feel that God answered that prayer by allowing her to see those tactics being used on other children, and that gave her the courage to come forth. As Mr. Powell mentioned, um, she faced her predator in court, and she pleaded that he not be given a house arrest. She was afraid. She told the judge that she would be kept from testifying if he was released. 6 days after that, she was found dead. She also was victim shamed on the stand when she was asked why did she come forth. She said that it was to protect the other children, but she was asked, was it because she was jealous? So there she was victim shamed. She also had preachers that got on stand and was asked, questions, and they basically sided with the predator and was asked if he's found guilty of sexual molestation of a 12-year-old, which at the time they didn't know it went back to 11. Would it change your opinion? Both said no. So Jennifer faced some adversity, and whether she took her life, we'll never know. I don't have peace about it, and um, I just don't know. But I can tell you that our daughter's not here today because of the effects and years of sexual grooming. She pulled out every hair on her head because of sexual grooming. Um, I have said time again that the Jesus within her wrestled with the devil that tried to overcome her. People do not realize that sexual grooming is a way of control, and it's not stranger danger we have to worry about anymore. If you research has shown that 90%, 90 to 93% is done by people we know, whether it's a coach, a teacher, a neighbor, an uncle, a preacher. Only 3% is cited as strangers. So children are being molested and sexually groomed right under our noses. And there's a push for it in Hollywood. There's a push for it within the music industry. Social media, I will always say, it will be the death of our society. It has been a gateway, a portal to reach our children and to manipulate our children. Jennifer, she was taught into using secret apps at a very young age, and that's the way they communicated, through those secret apps. We didn't know about those. We didn't know to look for those. We weren't educated on. So, our goal is to educate others. When she passed away, we were determined that we would use what was meant for evil, that we would allow God to turn to good. And we are so thankful for this bill, House Bill 993, being passed. As Alan mentioned earlier, this isn't the end. To me, it's just the beginning. It's one of many that I would like to see, whether it be changed, added. We have a long way to go. There are other victims in our community who were victims before Jennifer. Jennifer should have never known who this person was, but their statute of limitations ran out. Why would we allow a child's statute of limitations to run out when we know that their brain does not develop until 25 years old? And we know through research, if abused, that the brain development is going to take even longer. How do we expect those victims to come forward? And how do we expect them to come forward when they get on the stand and say that they're fearful of their life, and then they're found dead 6 days later? How do we encourage girls to come forward and give them the assurance that they're going to be protected? The chance to protect and save Jennifer was missed so many times. It is unreal. It's almost hard to fathom when you sit down and you look through it all, at all of the chances that someone had to get it right or to save her. So, you know, it's just so important that we come together as Republicans, Democrats, Independents, as all different colors. Our community, our nation, we need to come together and we need to say what is most important to us. Our children should be what is most important to us. They're our greatest resource. And we need to have laws in place that are going to protect them from such evil people. The laws right now are more in gear to protect the guilty rather than the innocent. And in Jennifer's case, you have victims whose statutes ran out. Where is their voice? So I can tell you that I don't know if you can see this handout. I've given away 700 of these. It's a good touch, bad touch. Me and my husband, um, people who love Jennifer in our community, we have a booth. We participate in 2 to 3 booths a year. So in 3 years, we've given out over 700 of these. There was a GoFundMe account that went toward Jennifer when she passed. And that money has been used to date to buy T-shirts, signs, books, literature to hand out back into the community. Our goal is to educate others. It's not going to bring our daughter back, but we hope and pray that it will protect other children and that no other family will have to live without their child or witness their child pull out their hair or witness their child be dealt with anxiety and depression or low self-esteem because they were sexually groomed and manipulated. And another book I just want to bring that I'm going to start donating to the community is From My Head to My Toes. This was written by Allie Reisman, who is an Olympic gymnast who was sexually abused by the gymnast coach Larry Nasser. In all, he groomed over 500 women. They reported their abuse to the FBI and they failed to investigate, just like in Jennifer's case, or they failed to investigate. The sheriff's office failed to investigate. Here we got Olympic gymnasts that came forward. They were adults that came forward and they were not heard. So what does it take? How many Jennifers, how many little girls, little boys does it take before we wake up and say we're going to start protecting our greatest resource, our children? What does it take that our laws, all of our states have laws to protect them? It should be state and federal, national laws to protect our children. And far as Alan goes, he was so good about once he understood what grooming was, fighting for this. So we're so thankful for Alan. I'm thankful for Bo Hatchett, who is also a senator. He helped lead me to the right people. It was one person who led me to another person, and it started out in our hometown at a Republican meeting where a individual was running for office. His name was Michael Bogus, and he referred me to Bo Hatchett, who referred me back to Alan Powell, and also Clyde. Sorry, his last name. I can't remember his last name, but he also helped. So it was just one door after another door. And if a door shut, we found a way around it. And I give credit to God for that. So I thank you all for allowing me this time to speak and be here today.
Susan, thank you so much. I'm really sorry for your loss, and I think collectively we're grieving with you and we're inspired to continue our work because of stories like the one you've shared. And you've done a beautiful job of honoring who your daughter was and also carrying her legacy forward to ensure better futures for other children. So I just want to acknowledge that. If there's anything we as a community can do to support you and your family, please don't hesitate to let us know. You're not alone. I know you have felt that and expressed those who've come alongside, but truly thank you so much for being willing to put yourself back into that vulnerable state to share with us so we can keep up the fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of closing thoughts and announcements, and I just want to thank all the people who've made this happen. Carla Jacobs with the Commission on Women, Elena Acosta at CJCC, Juliana, my colleague on the coalition, and then all of our speakers, the senators, representatives, Shannon, Susan. It's been a really special program, and the work is not done, and we'll keep the fight up into the next session and just making Georgia the safest place and the least tolerant for trafficking and exploitation. So Juliana, I'll hand it over to you to close this out.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff, and I've enjoyed working with you and Director Neil. Thank you for kicking us off today and introducing our legislators. Again, thank you so much. I have an opportunity to work with each and every one of them during the session and even outside the session. So thank them so much for what they do in carrying the legislation, and I especially thank Shannon, you and Susan for being here and sharing your stories with us. It's just so impactful when we hear personally from you, and thank you. And we will continue to work with you in the future. I want to again, then, as we close today, Carla Jacobs was dropping a survey, I think, in our chat. We ask you, and you'll be getting an email with the survey coming up after the meeting. Please do complete that survey so that it helps us as we plan even future programs. Also, there will be a certificate of attendance link, and so if you need that, please complete that. And we want to announce also our next conversation with an expert. You see how impactful this is, and we're just so excited to have so many people joining us today, as well as those in CJCC and their staff who help work with us to help make this possible. But all of you for joining us, as well as those, but especially, of course, those who addressed us today. Our next conversation with an expert will be a 3-part series, and it will be responding to human trafficking in a medical setting. That's going to be beginning in September. We don't have the final dates yet, so be watching your email so that so you'll see when those are coming up, so you can join us again for our conversations with the expert. Again, thank everyone, and I pray that you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.